welcome to Leave Your Mark. I'm Scott Livingston, and today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Gerry Ramogida. Gerry is an extremely talented chiropractor who's been working in some of the most intense and demanding sports performance environments throughout his career. He is currently a consultant with many Olympic athletes as well as professional athletes in the MLB, NHL, NFL, and EPL. He has been the Seattle Seahawks team chiropractor and performance therapist since 2002. He's worked at numerous international track and field events and has a unique interest in the sport of athletics, maintaining a working relationship with Altus Training Group in Phoenix, Arizona. In January of 2010, Gerry was hired by the United Kingdom Athletics to bring his methods of trackside performance therapy to the UK to help the nation's efforts to meet high expectations at the 2012 London Summer Olympic Games, where his contributions clearly made a difference. The reason I've asked Gerry on Leave Your Mark is not only because he is an accomplished performance professional, but because he's a man willing to share and mentor others. I've witnessed Gerry's deep conviction to his craft and his honest desire to help others be better themselves. He is also a dedicated father and family man. I'm honored to have him here today. Welcome, Gerry.
Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you for that introduction. I appreciate all the kind words.
Well, it's really nice to be able to sit down and chat with you today because we've bounced a lot into each other over the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years, and I've had the opportunity, as I said, to watch you teach and to watch you mentor others, and I was always impressed by your honest effort to give to others and to give some of yourself, which I think at the end of the day is one of the big hallmarks of or differentiating factors for me on people who are really good at what they do and people who just want to be or show that they're good, so to speak. And
Sure.
I'm wondering, sort of as a kickoff, because I know you're in football now, and you grew up in Surrey and Vancouver as a Canadian boy. You're a Canadian. What is your favorite sport to watch? Like, what do you like watching?
Oh boy, favorite is a hard choice. I enjoy watching almost everything because there's an appreciation for what athletes do, regardless of the sport, the skill that they have, and just the quality of movement that they express. But as a fan, I would have to say, hockey and football are very close. And then just from a professional standpoint, like you touched upon in the intro, track and field is a passion. So hard to separate it out. Appreciate all sports, but yeah, probably football, hockey, and then track.
Were you a Canucks fan growing up?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I was a painful
through all the difficult times.
Oh my goodness. It was funny. Anyone who's had a team that struggled for many years, you almost become used to watching your team to watch other teams come into town for their talent, Gretzky, Lemieux, all those guys, because you just knew it was going to be a difficult watch on any given night. So yeah, I've been a long-suffering Canucks fan.
That's awesome. Do you remember the first time you ever went to a live game in Vancouver?
Boy, yeah, I would have been at the old Pacific Coliseum. I'm trying to remember who they were playing.
In those crazy uniforms with the
the black, orange, yellow, the skate.
They had so many different logos over the years.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely the ugliest at the time was that the V, the yellow, gold, black, red on black V, and I don't even know how that happened.
Who designed that? And they should have been shot.
Where it came from.
What were some of your key influences as you grew up? Like, what sort of shaped you as a young person growing up in Vancouver and Surrey?
My dad is probably my biggest influence. He came to Canada when he was 12 years old, and relatively teenager, and just didn't have a lot of education, obviously, and was raised or spent a lot of time, obviously, with his brother, his oldest brother, who had moved to Canada kind of at that time. Europe was after World War stonemason and bricklayer, and just the work ethic that he had to kind of um, provide for us was something that it's not something that I think I was constantly aware of, but it certainly transferred into me in terms of just knowing that, you know what, if you want to accomplish things, you need to work hard. And he just displayed it, day in, day out, sometimes 6 and 7 days a week. And also with the limitations of his education, very early on started his own business and became, very successful ultimately as a housing contractor. And just showed that, it's really the degree of determination that someone has that allows you to accomplish things. And I think that passed over to me in a lot of ways. I grew up playing soccer, and then in high school I started playing football, but I was the smallest kid on the field. And I think that aspect of just working as hard as you possibly can passed on to me, and made me successful as an athlete, with opportunities to play university football and things like that. But definitely, my dad would be probably the biggest influence from the early days, for sure.
What was your mom's role in your life, so to speak?
Yeah, my dad was definitely the hot-blooded Italian. Like anyone who's listening who has a European parent, that he just had to give you a look. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to, and so there is definitely a degree of not a roughness, but mom was the comforter. Mom was the one you went to when you needed consoling, and so that was kind of her role to nurture. And she did a great job of that, for sure.
So your dad was from Italy?
Yeah.
Is that where your mom's from too, or they?
Mother was born in Austria and came over when she was 3 years old. So she pretty much grew up in Vancouver, Burnaby. So
you got that Germanic Italian mix going on there.
That's it, exactly.
Stoic fire, so to speak.
That's it.
So you played football. I didn't realize that. That's cool.
Yeah, high school football. Growing up, I played anything that they let me. Soccer, baseball, track. And then once I got to high school, I initially played a lot of soccer, and that was kind of my passion. We moved out to Surrey, a suburb of Vancouver, when I was quite young, and the one thing we did have out there was a lot of space, a lot of room. So it was me and my soccer ball and just kicking the ball around by myself a lot. And soccer was definitely a passion, kind of growing up to that high school level. And then once I was in high school, I went to a Catholic high school, and football was king. And I always dreamed of playing quarterback, growing up a 49ers fan and watching Joe Montana and Gerry Rice and those guys. And had the opportunity to start playing quarterback in grade 8 at 4'6" or whatever I was.
Quarterback, I like it. Okay.
So Gerry. I'm a quarterback and a defensive back or / safety. And loved playing quarterback, but my favorite was definitely on the defense because, it was just, I love to hit people. Just that young man aggression where you just wanted to hit people. And, I can remember one of the early football coaches I had, he used to always come up to me and goes, "Ramogida, it's not the size of the dog, it's the size of the fight of the dog." And I was just get all fired up. People, I remember playing against our nemesis. They were our nemesis. We were barely a blip in the road for them. It was Vancouver College, and at my size, they had a tight end that was like 6'2" and 220, and like I said, I was maybe 5 foot and 130. And I remember coming out of my safety spot, he caught a pass, and I was like bug on the windshield. I hit him with everything I had, and the next second I'm staring at the sky with all the snot down my face, going, "Whoa! Someone get the license plate of that truck!"
That's beautiful. What is the game of football? And there could be numerous different points of debarkation for that. But the game of football, both from playing and now working and watching it at its highest levels, taught you.
You know, I think it kind of goes across most team sports, but certainly, yeah, I always say that the lessons I learned in sport really prepared me for life. You know, teamwork, knowing what your role is, trying to do your job the best way you possibly can, and not trying to do more, and trusting those around you that they're going to do their job. And just, yeah, having trust in one another to accomplish a common goal. It teaches you teamwork, but and then further, getting along with people that you may not always agree with or get along with. So you learn how to be inclusive, how to work with different individuals from different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Teaches you conviction, sticking to it when, going back to that grade 8 year, we didn't win a game. I mean, we were terrible. And it's, you're sitting in class and watching the rain pour down, and you're practicing on a sandlot field, and you're thinking, oh, I really don't want to go out there. But you have this commitment to the guys around you that you're going to go out there and give it all you have every day. And I remember when we scored our first touchdown, it was probably the second last game of the year, and it was that was massive for us. And that group was that all those things. That group we ended up going to the provincial championship in our grade 12 year, and going into like quadruple overtime and losing in quadruple overtime. But when you think this ragtag bunch of kids that, we couldn't, like I said, we couldn't get out of our own way. I think one of our running backs actually scored a touchdown for the other team because he ran the wrong way. But all those aspects of commitment, just committing to just getting better every day, teamwork, dedication,
sounds like it taught you resiliency as well.
100%. 100%. Yeah, for sure.
What took you into, sort of segue into your education? How did you find chiropractic, or did it find you?
Yeah, I experienced chiropractic personally. Well, what happened, in watching my father, as I was speaking to earlier, he did have a history of kind of chronic low back issues, and probably goes back to his early days of being a kid and helping out his brothers back in Italy, carrying rocks and bricks, and then doing that for a good part of his adult life as well. And there would be episodes where he'd just be laying on our living room floor for 3, 4, or 5 days until he could go back to work again. And those were episodes that I recall. And what would happen typically, when it was bad enough, he'd end up going to his GP, who would give him, the traditional painkillers and muscle relaxants, and he'd take meds until he could get off the floor. And a friend of his at that time recommended a chiropractor, and this would have been probably in the 80s, the first time, when chiropractic didn't have, there was significant bias in the medical field, but he was like, look, I'll try anything to help. And he had significant improvement and help when he had his episodes. So being an athlete myself, and also doing a lot of downhill skiing, I I remember my my first low back strain was from skiing, taking a nice jump and having the flat landing, and going, oh my goodness, that didn't feel so good. So had because my dad was already going, went in, experienced chiropractic, and got good results, and then basically used that through high school with all the sports that I partook in. And the thing that always attracted me to it was, if I went to my GP with a specific injury, he'd be like, okay, so you're not going to do anything for 2 weeks. And, as an athlete, you hear that and you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen, but okay, whatever you say, doc. And when I'd go to the chiropractor, he'd treat me. I'd feel some relief right away. And there was kind of that, he never said, don't play. So that to me, I was like, I kind of leave. I feel somewhat better, and I'm going to play anyway. But there was no forbidding to play the sport. So that kind of influenced me. And then, like we were mentioning, I was a big 49ers fan, and the Super Bowl, I believe, against the Bengals, where they came back and Joe Montana had that 2-minute drive that just from their own 20 down the field, and they ended up scoring the winning touchdown. But in that game, Joe Montana, they showed him being treated on the sideline by a chiropractor. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. Like, this guy's on the sideline of the Super Bowl. That stuck with me at that point, that you could have a degree of involvement in sport with that profession. And so those were kind of the early influences that had me thinking chiropractic.
And then you went into school and took the program. And what was it that, what did you resonate with? Was it the ability to make change, like you were just talking about? Was it the use of your hands? Was it the supporting somebody, or was it a combination of things that really attracted you?
Yeah, it's interesting, because when I was in university, I still was thinking about medicine and chiro and physiotherapy. At the end of the day, it was really a desire. I wanted to help people. And given my experiences, I had a degree of empathy for what people were going through who were suffering from physical discomfort, and wanted to be able to help people in that way. And just because I had a strong interest in sport, always wanted to do something that would at least let me, from the fringes, have a degree of involvement. And it was funny, it was actually medical school that kind of really made the direction to chiropractic final for me. Back in the day, UBC had the process. You did your MCATs and you submitted your application, and if they were interested, you went to interview number 1, and if you did okay in 1, you went to interview 2, and if you made it through interview 2, they sent you on to the dean of admissions. And so I made it to interview 3 with the dean, and that summer I had done a biomedical ethics course, and it was the topic of euthanasia, and which was a hot topic at that time. And it was a philosophy course as well as biomedical ethics. And the teacher also told you your position. It's like, you're going to argue for euthanasia. And at that time, I was like, are you kidding? I don't agree with that at all. But then I started having to study the models that were in place in the Netherlands, and ended up, through my research, coming to an understanding, that there's a degree of dignity that people in these end-of-life situations have in being able to make that choice, and all the rules and such. So anyway, we go into this interview, and they tell you to be prepared for issues that are in the media currently. And I knew the answer he wanted when he asked the question. So, tell me your position on euthanasia. But I couldn't do it. I had to give him my whole spiel after all the research, because I could back it up. I had the research, and I knew right then and there it was over. I tried to get in a logical argument with him. I was like, doc, tell me, what's the difference between an active, doctors can we can stop treatment. So that's an act of omission. But if we assist, it's an act of commission. So really the end result's the same. So, and he just shook his head. He goes, he's trying to tell me there's no difference. And so anyway, needless to say, medical school did not happen. And I already had acceptance letters from a few of the chiropractic schools. And I was like, well, and then the irony, he goes, look, you have a good application. I think you should take a year off, go travel, get some life experience and come back. And I was like, Doc, if you want to fund that effort, I'd be happy to travel for a year. But needless to say, I went into chiropractic and no regrets for certain.
That's awesome. That's a good story. Do you think you would have been a good doctor?
I look at, I think so. I believe so. I mean, to me,
you would have been controversial, doctor. probably, because I can't. To me, all these professions are about relationships and empathy and being an advocate. Being an advocate for the people you work for. Ultimately, always trying to do what's in their best interest. And in our Canadian system, we have our challenges with wait times and accessibility and things like that. And those types of things, I don't know that I would have had a really tough time with those types of things, knowing I have patients that are waiting longer than what is reasonable for the services they need and require. And given I still work within the Canadian system, and so those are still frustrations, but being in the position I am, it makes it a lot easier for me to advocate and push a lot harder. I feel for physicians who are in the system, because you're part of the system and you're kind of torn. You're being told one thing by your board. You suffer from the limitations. So it must be an extremely challenging position to be in on a daily basis, where you know what someone needs, but you also know that there's significant limitations, so you can't really advocate as much as you'd like. Mm. Whereas as a chiropractor, I'm expected to be loud and a pain in the rear end, so I can fill that role at it very well. Well, it's actually a good segue for something that I think is a thread of commonality between you and I, which is sort of your sensitivity to the proactive use of your skills and your abilities when it comes into this concept of performance therapy, and the idea of using what you know how to do to actually change things before they actually become problematic. What was the genesis of that in you as a practitioner? What drove you to start looking at how you could use these skills on the side of the track, or in some space to actually make changes immediately and move the athlete or the person forward without it actually always being reactionary, which we typically see in the medical paradigm, so to speak? Sure.
Yeah, there were probably two major influences that led me in that direction. One was finding active release techniques and Dr. Mike Leahy very early in my career. I started practice, and I was only a few months in, and I was already starting to really get frustrated in that, I treat a patient with the methods I had, some very basic soft tissue work and manipulation, some basic rehab exercises, and they'd keep coming back with the same issue, usually with temporary relief, but usually after a period of time, the same issue returned. And I was doing everything I knew, and I started searching. I was like, there's got to be more answers than this, because I can't continue. If I can't figure out how to get people relief and actually resolve these issues, this is going to be a really frustrating profession. And fortunately, ART was mentioned to me, and I was like, okay, well, let's look into this. And I remember taking my first seminar and being inspired by a lot of guys and girls who were doing what I wanted to do, working in the NFL, working with professional athletes. Dr. Mark Lindsay working with Donovan Bailey, Joe Polino working with NHL players, lots of guys like that. And I was like, holy smokes. And then learning this technique that when I went back Monday, I started getting significantly better results almost right away. I was like, wow, you really can make change and make change quickly. And through that, we had a biomechanics course down at the University of Texas and with Dan Path. And I had already heard a lot about Dan Path because I was working with Kevin Tyler, a track coach locally in Vancouver at the time. And, Dan was legendary already at that time, working with Donovan Bailey, Bruni Sur, and Mark Boswell, all these great Canadian athletes. And because of that, I had a really distinct curiosity that I wanted to get down there. And then this opportunity came up to go down and do this course with Dan and Mike Leahy. And, I thought at the time, I go, you know what? I was going to help assist a course in Dallas the week after the biomechanics course in Austin, Texas, where Dan was. And we did the course, and that's where I really started to appreciate that if you really understood what an athlete was trying to accomplish, and you knew what they were trying to do in terms of the skill and the movement pattern that they were working toward, if you were to then observe limitation, combining that knowledge of what they're trying to do with the anatomy, you could impart change if you had effective techniques to do so. And so that was Dan really influenced me in that regard. And I fell in love with the approach. And you look back to events in your life that had probably the biggest impact on the direction your whole career took. And for me, I did the biomechanics course, and I didn't have anywhere to stay, but I knew I wanted to stay that week and just hang around and watch Dan work. And, to his credit, there's this barely experienced kid that can do ART and just graduated from chiropractic college. And he embraced it with open arms. And in essence, I just followed him around for an entire week on the track and, met Donovan and Bruni and Mark Boswell and all those guys who were inspirations to me in terms of their athletic abilities, and got to know these guys, started doing work with them. And Dan just for a week, just never stopped. Just, this is what I'm looking for here. You get an opportunity to sit and watch Obadeli Thompson, Donovan Bailey, and a number of really talented athletes coming out of the blocks during training. And I'm just like a kid in a candy store. And so, that opportunity, and then having those two influences in Mike Leahy and in Dan Path, it kind of set the stage where I really grabbed onto this proactive approach. Let's get movement quality the best it can be on a daily basis, so that practice can be the highest quality. Athletes, your hope is that by improving movement quality on a daily basis, you're reducing injury frequency. You're recognizing when limitations are occurring before they become problematic, and that kind of set the stage as to where we are today.
That's awesome. Just a little segue into Dan, because I'm going to talk to Dan tomorrow a little bit, but your desire to share and mentor, did you learn, or were you influenced by Dan through that? Because every person who's ever talked to me about Dan, including my own personal experiences with him, is he's a very giving educator, somebody who in some sense, maybe to a fault in some sense, has always sort of given himself and his knowledge to others. Was that powerful for you, or influential in your career?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I remember going into his office the first time and just being amazed by the stacks and stacks of papers, and at the time it was all VHS tapes, and I mean literally floor to ceiling stacks of videos and papers, and just you could see how the passion at which he approached it. But he didn't hide anything. There were no secrets. It was like anything you wanted to know, any question you had, or anything he felt was important, he just gave it out freely. And that had a huge impact on me. And, I tried to, I've tried to emulate that as much as I've been able to in my career, for sure, because, you think about the things you learn and the experiences you gain, and Dan and his now over almost 40 years of experience. What good is that if it's not shared and it goes to the grave with you? I mean, it's almost it's a waste not to share it. And I think people get caught up a lot of times in this. It's the an attitude of lack. That as a chiropractor, I don't want to share. You somehow feel that an athlete becomes a possession. That's my athlete, or that's my patient. And if you let yourself go down that road, it just ends up closing so many doors around your opportunity to share and learn and experience. And the happiest patients are the ones that you openly tell them, look, I don't have the answers for you, but this person may have better answers for you than I do. And that becomes a patient for life, because they know that you have their best interests at heart. And so, yeah, absolutely. Dan was a huge influence in that regard.
I want to pivot off of that last thing that you said. It's a huge one especially for younger practitioners who might be listening to this. When did you have that epiphany for yourself that the better treatment or the better care of a client comes from you finding the solution, whether you have it or not, and finding them the right direction? When did you have that realization personally?
Yeah. I don't know that I can think it back to a specific incident or time. It definitely would have been very kind of early in practice. I was at a clinic out in a small community called Aldergrove, and limited services. So it became you'd get everything walking in the door, right? Because they're just coming for answers. Because I think there was 2 medical clinics for the whole community, so it's hard to get in there. And then there were 2 chiropractic clinics, and very quickly I had to learn to say I don't know. Because that skin rash, I'm sorry, I have no clue what that is. And as well, I knew based on my training that at that time that I had the basics of rehab, but I knew that there were a lot of people who could do it a lot better. And so, yeah, I always, I think it goes back kind of to very early on, that understanding what your limitations are from your education, and not being afraid to say it. It was there kind of early.
Cool. What have been, when you look back at yourself, early practitioner to now as a professional, what do you see as your really most important growth as a person, in what you do now, in the way you practice now?
I think the more techniques I've learned, and the more experiences I have, and I think I've been very fortunate that a lot of times I see people that have seen many practitioners and providers, and there's a significant part of people getting well that I've learned over the years, that a lot of times it's really just giving them an opportunity to tell you what's going on and listening to them, just letting them tell their story. Because there's a lot of people who I've had the opportunity to work with, again, who've seen multiple people. And if you were to put my skills up against other people's skills and certain providers, I know they have excellent skills.
Hmm.
So what's the difference? I think in healing professions, it really comes down to making that connection with someone and really giving someone an opportunity to communicate, to make a connection, and to have them really feel that you are listening and you're empathetic to what they're going through. That, and then the other thing would be is, again, the human body is so complex. It's a complex system. As is becoming more and more apparent, and we don't know 100%, what our inputs are doing and what the result's going to be on a given day with a given person with their emotional state and their physiologic state and all those things. But I think it really comes down to their trust in you and building that trust through that connection you make by being open, listening to them, and then also being very careful and aware of what your intentions are and what your headspace is when you're in the room with that person. A provider that Dr. Gabrielle LaSalle, she was the practitioner that owned the clinic that I started way out in Aldergrove in the early days. And she said to me, she goes, I asked her what it took to be successful, and she goes, just do one thing. Treat the patient in front of you like they're your only patient. Because at that time, you know what? They are. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It's true. I mean, give just the person in front of you, give them the attention and the empathy and the time necessary to feel that they're being heard. That's probably what I've realized over the years. You can have a toolbox of 6 million different techniques, and we've all been there trying to learn the latest and greatest, and then you realize, there's value in all those techniques and knowing when to use them. But at the end of the day, I've seen people who have one or two techniques and they do incredibly well because there is that human aspect of just empathy and connection.
Mm-hmm. Huge. So you've got this, you got a pretty impressive resume, my friend. So, how does somebody create that, for maybe a younger professional or somebody in their middle career? A lot of times they're chomping at the bit to do what you do, work at the Seattle Seahawks or whatever it is. What's your advice to them, and what has been your experience in crafting that career, those opportunities, and taking them in a direction that's allowed you to really fulfill your own character and who you are?
Right. I think the biggest thing, and I tell this a lot to young docs that come and hang out at Fortius with me and want to shadow, and they ask, that how'd you get to where you are? And, when you have the intention of what you want to accomplish, sometimes those connections just kind of come by happenstance. But the biggest thing for me, when I started, I knew I wanted to get involved in sport, but I knew as a chiropractor, other than playing a lot of the sports, I had no experience. And so when I got to Aldergrove, my first thing, the rink was on the next corner. I just walked over and watched. There was a midget team practicing, and I just said, "Hey, can I help out?" I had my portable table, and I'm like, "Look, I just want to learn, how I can help you guys and what skills I have that can help you." And I did that for hockey. I did that for a local soccer team, and then I also went down to the Langley Rugby Club, who had a first, second, third division men's squad and a women's squad, and I got to know the coach, and I said, "Hey, I want to come and help." And through those, and then the other was with track. And at the time, Kevin Tyler was a coach out in Richmond. And so I'd drive from Aldergrove to Richmond, which is a good hour and a half, just to also go up there and watch. And I can trace everything I've done back to those early efforts at volunteering because, Kevin went on to coach Tyler Christopher, who became the first Canadian to break 45 seconds in the 400 and win a bronze medal when we were in Helsinki, Finland. It was through him that I ended up meeting Dan. And then Dan was good friends with the head strength coach of the Seattle Seahawks, who were looking for an ART provider to come in and help train their staff. And through some of the volunteering, I got to meet a physiotherapist named Rick Celebrini. And now Rick Celebrini, he's been the head of the Whitecaps, their science and medicine. He's been the head of rehab for the Canucks and has moved on now with the Golden State Warriors as their head of, as their director of performance and sports medicine. When you immerse yourself with no expectation of financial return and just the desire to learn, it's that those connections, you never know where they're going to take you. And that would be my recommendation to people. Figure out what your passion is in terms of what it is you want to do. And then the other thing would be, and it's always, you always hear it, but find mentors. That first day, like I mentioned, that first ART class, I met Mark Lindsay, Dr. Joe Polino, Mark Scapitici, all these giants in the field. And those guys were unbelievable. They shared everything they knew. And it got to the point where Mark would just call me and say, "Hey, I take this course." I didn't even ask. Yeah, okay. When can I, and I'd look it up and take the next one, because those mentors already proved the path, and so I just did what they said. And, and that's really kind of how it all transpired.
It's a good segue for a part that I do in my podcasts. I found a book a number of years ago called The Day You Were Born, and basically it combines numerology with astrology, and I had this profound moment where I read my purpose and it connected with me and all that stuff. So one of the little things that I like to do is read the person's purpose that I'm talking to. So you are a Sagittarius 2.
Right.
So your purpose is to learn how to use your sensitivity and your vulnerability to overcome great odds, transforming them into inspirational strengths that get you to your goal and allow you to help others along the way.
Wow.
Until you try, you don't know what you can do. Henry James. Once Sag 2 has accepted the fact that they can't do everything and accept their talents, which are many, they're on their way. The danger is their desire to have someone else protect them. Giving power away always leads to trouble. So I don't know if any of that resonates for you or not, but
that is eerie. Wow. You got to send me a copy of that. Holy smokes. There's a lot of truth there, my friend. Holy.
Pretty cool, eh? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I tell the story, so I don't like to chew up too much time in my podcast with it, but because it's sort of connected with you, I'll tell you, when I found the book, I was after my second divorce, and I'd had this saying taped to the top of my desktop that some men see things as they are and say why, dream things that never were and say why not. And so this had been on my desktop for probably about 10, 12 years. And I picked up this book, and I go to Sag 3, and I read the purpose, and it really resonated. Like I was like, whoa, that's incredible. And the first line of the next paragraph, which each one has a quote, was that quote. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I bought the book, and now I do. And then about 8 times out of 10, people are like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Yeah. I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about, your experience. It's not everybody's experience to be a part of a Super Bowl winning team. And, what did you learn about what it takes to be the very best in that process of winning that Super Bowl?
Yeah, it's a lot of things. You need one, you need the talent, but in the NFL, everybody has talent.
Mm.
And granted, you look back now in our roster, man, we had an incredible amount of talent and a lot of depth. Two, we had a head coach who came in and had an incredible ability to explain and share his vision, his philosophy, and all the qualities that he knew we had to display to become a championship team. And his ability to clearly articulate it and get people on board with it was incredible.
Mm.
Three, you got to get lucky. You got to get a little bit lucky. I mean, we finished that season, I think, 13-3 or 12-4, and we had home field advantage. But one or two losses the other way, and you don't have that home field, and who knows what happens. But there were games where the difference was the other team hitting an upright on a field goal that would have changed the outcome, or a fumble that ends up in your hands instead of the guy 3 inches to your right on the other team. So you got to get a little bit lucky, and granted, preparation. What's the saying?
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm going to forget it. But when preparation
meets opportunity, it's what you perceive as luck, so to speak. Yeah.
Right. And we also, we did well that year in terms of injury. We had our fair share of them, but we did really well at getting guys back quick. I think we had the quickest return in terms of per injury, the number of man games lost that year. We did extremely well that way. And then we got lucky. We didn't have any big key injuries at the right position. And you can also, there's an aspect of managing guys well, and the coaching staff doing a good job of managing load, to find yourself in that position, and then doing it, getting to the Super Bowl back-to-back years. But yeah, a clear vision, having the talent, having the support around that talent to keep them on the field, and and a little bit of luck.
And maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But did you experience any learning or moment of reflection around the opportunity to win one and also to not win one? Was there something that you grew from out of that?
I'll tell you that the halftime of the first Super Bowl, it was like every experience I had in my career was preparing me for that moment. Because I had 3 specific issues to deal with within a very short period of time, and I knew I had one chance at each of them. But being through a number of Olympic Games where the pressure can be kind of crazy with Olympics and different experiences along the way, I had, it almost felt like everything I'd done to that point was for that moment, and all 3 of the situations, all 3 of those athletes, we got the desired result in the short time frame we have, and they both all went out to continue to contribute to us winning. To lose the game that with the way we did in that second one, I mean, it's a heartache to this day, and still wake up thinking, did I dream it? But it's funny. I reflect back, and you just, a lot of times you do, and you know this. You learn a lot more from your failures than your successes. And I learned some interesting things about sport in general in that moment. I mean, why do we love sports so much? It's because it takes us on this emotional journey where you're going to experience the highest highs and the lowest lows, and that's why we love it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it taught me that all you can do is do the best you can in the situation you're in to contribute towards it. And you know what? Sometimes it's going to go your way, and sometimes you're just going to be on the wrong end of of an event, of a play, and you know, but it's why we all love it,
Mm-hmm.
because it makes you feel. It makes you feel the extremes, and as much as elating as it was to be on the field as the confetti and everything was flying around in New York the year before, to have that pass intercepted with less than 20 seconds left on the goal line, when you know, I remember letting my mind slip to the place of, oh my goodness, we're gonna have another parade. Like we're gonna win back-to-back Super Bowls, and I've never spoken directly to players about what they were thinking in that moment, but it reminds me of even of Lolo Jones. I don't know if you remember Lolo in Beijing.
Mm-hmm.
She was no one had run the 100-meter hurdles faster than her that year. She was undefeated. She was out to hurdle the second last hurdle with no one close, and she let her mind wander for a second and look up at the big screen and hit that final hurdle, that second last hurdle. And like that, it's over. And I just wonder how many of their guys on the field just let that focus slip for that brief second, or who knows, maybe, who knows. But it just showed me how easy it is to lose focus of what you need to do in that moment, and don't let your mind wander anywhere else until it's over.
Mm-hmm. Crazy. I wanted to feel that with you, because it's not a common reality for people to have experienced what you experienced. It's a powerful piece to listen to.
Right.
Did you ever have a tickling moment? Telling that story earlier about Montana getting a manipulation on the sideline, and then segue forward X number of years. Here you are doing that at halftime. Did you ever have that sort of moment of revelation? Here I am doing exactly what I saw.
I can remember. It's funny because I remember thinking just after graduating chiropractic college that, hey, I want to work in the NFL. You know what? I think I'm going to end up working in the NFL. And just thinking, there was that side of me that wanted it, and then there's the rational side saying, you're such an idiot. You live in Vancouver. There's no NFL team. Like, how is that going to happen? But there was always that, that part of me that just, there was this, no, I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And then I remember I was at the Canadian National Championships in Edmonton in the Holiday Inn in my room, and my cell phone rings, and it's the head strength coach from the Seahawks, and he's got this Texas drawl, Kent Johnson. Hey, Gerry, it's Kent Johnson. And I'm like, from the Seattle Seahawks. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? And I remember at that moment going, yeah, see, I knew this was going to happen. So yeah, it was. There's these moments where you look at where you've gotten, and you just, it was just absolutely thankful for the opportunities, and you just go, wow, man, this really happened. Like, really got here.
What's been the greatest cost for you? Call it a negative element or a cost or whatever, of being good at what you do and having those experiences and those opportunities. It comes. I think sometimes people look at these things and they go, "Oh wow, I'd like to be him," or whatever, but they don't always understand the cost. Yeah. What has been a cost for you personally?
To ask my wife. The biggest cost is certainly the impact that that it's had probably on time away from my family. There were periods when I was working in Britain where you were away 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time. And, one of the most heartbreaking incidents in my life was I was in Los Angeles at a warm weather camp, and my son was 3 years old at the time, and he wouldn't come to the phone. And my wife said, "You know what he said today?" She was walking him back from Montessori school, and they were talking about school, and my son said, "Mom, I wish I had a dad."
Oh,
And I was just like, as only a 3-year-old can say, And I was just like, she told me that, and I was just devastated, that this, because, yeah, you think he's 3 years old, and I was, he was born in October of the year going into the Olympics in Beijing. So I was away at the camp, at the pre-Olympic camp in Singapore, and then we went to Beijing. So, you're gone for months at a time. And for a little guy, that's a big chunk of his life, when you're gone a month or you're gone 8 weeks. I mean, and so there's certainly a cost. And today, and it's nice today because of technology. You and I are looking at it, being able to talk and communicate. But that wasn't the case not that long ago. But there's certainly the impact it has on your immediate family when you these opportunities are great. Don't get me wrong, and they're enjoyable and they're fun on the professional side, and they fulfill a part of us to contribute towards something bigger than ourselves. But yeah, that would probably be the biggest cost, has been the time away from family, for sure. And then as an individual, when you work in these professions that we have the good fortune to work in, is you typically become good because you really care. And the other side of it is just the emotional learning to come to an understanding that you can't fix everything, and that a lot of times, despite your best efforts, bad things happen. And it should cause you a moment to reflect. Was there anything you could have done differently, given the information you had? But a lot of times you're going to come to the conclusion, if you're honest with yourself, that no, you couldn't have done anything differently. And the hardest thing is to accept that and to give yourself the emotional break to say, I did the best I could with the information I had, because we do care so much. And that every, like I said earlier, I learn more from each of my failures than the successes. I remember with Greg Rutherford, everyone remembers Greg at the Olympics winning the gold medal at a home Olympics, and it was the culmination of 3 years of effort. But almost a year to the day before that, the year prior, it was Greg's first season going into the World Championships, where he didn't have a significant injury going into the Worlds, and on his first jump into the pit on full world broadcast, he tore his hamstring because he made a technical mistake that he hadn't made in a long time. And I remember, there were a few key things that we could have done better, that we could have done differently, and I learned far more from that. With him crying and then having to bring him back and say, hey, look, yeah, does this suck right now? Absolutely, it sucks. But let's look at this year. You went a whole season without an injury. You've had one of your best career seasons of your life, and at the end of the day, this doesn't matter because our goal is 1 year away at the Olympics, and so in that failure, you take the lessons, and it culminated a year later with him winning the Olympic Games. But the failures definitely teach you a lot.
What changed for you becoming a dad? What changed in you?
Certainly, the the real my wife might argue this, but certainly realizing that it's not all about me, you know, that there are things change when you know that there is someone who needs you there, who is dependent upon you to provide, and not, in every way. Um, and it changes your motivation. You have different motivations when you don't have a child, and then once you have a child, you know, everything becomes about trying to do what's best for them and to provide the best environment, best life, and as well to provide the best example for them. So it definitely has an impact kind of on mindset, and also gives you different perspective about what's important. It at the end of the day, a lot of times I got to remind myself, that we put so much significance into sport, but at the end of the day, it is also just a game, and there are far more important things in life, and you definitely gain a new perspective on that when you have a child. That you just, everything you do, you want to provide the best of everything for them. And that relationship is more significant than anything you can accomplish professionally.
Who inspires you now? Who do you look to for inspiration as you move forward in your career?
That's a good question. I still look at Dan. He's been at it this many years, and still approaches it passionately. He's got his grandchildren now that he's takes so much pride in telling me about when we're on the phone, and he's enjoying that aspect. But he's still, he's still does his reading every night in subjects completely foreign to track, and then others not. But he's by all intents and purposes accomplished everything there is to accomplish in his profession. Yet he's still working to learn. Like, he just does not stop. And so, that inspires me. I look at, Pete Carroll is an interesting guy that I've had the fortune to be around, and he talks about achieving greatness, or accomplishing, reaching the pinnacle. But he also talks about what it takes to achieve sustained success, and those types of things I think are inspiring to me now. It's kind of, a lot of people get to the top, and then now the biggest challenge is how do you stay at the top, and so those, that's inspiring in terms of continuing to try to always being curious, always wanting to learn, and continuing that way. I think when we get to the point where that starts to go, then it might be time to consider doing something else, because you need to remain passionate.
Final question, my friend. When you pass from this earth, which will happen one day, hopefully not for a long, long time, but how do you hope people remember you?
It's a good one too. I hope that people realize, that I care, that I cared for those around me, and that I did the best I could to help those around me be better, do better, get better. That would probably be the the big thing that I did as much as I could with the skills and talents that I had to help others, that I cared.
Awesome. Great way to finish. Thank you very much for your time, my friend, and been a great conversation. It's great to get to know you even more deeply. So thank you for taking the time, Gerry.
Thank you, Scott, for the opportunity. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.